When it comes to video games, there are several types of enemies a player might face. The boss is the big bad. That's the enemy players have to take down to end a stage or finish the game, and they can be insanely difficult to beat. Just beneath the boss is the mini-boss. Now these should be substantially less difficult than the boss, but far more difficult than the underlings you've been fighting so far. You'll generally also usually have to fight the mini-boss before you can access the boss. At least that's how a mini-boss should be. They shouldn't be so insanely difficult that a player will want to rage quit whatever game they're playing to be done with them. If a mini-boss's power or abilities are too OP, it can be incredibly frustrating. There are thousands of mini-bosses belonging to just about every game genre out there, but some are harder to defeat than others. Those deadly, dangerous and dastardly mini-bosses are listed here, though they're hardly the only ones who've made gamers want to rage. I'm Just for What Culture. Let's take a painful walk down memory lane that I'm sure will remind me why I've broken so many controllers and mice and keyboards over the years. I did not put temper in my Steam username for nothing. Number 10. Kintaro, Mortal Kombat 2. The first Mortal Kombat game introduced the world to the burly, four-armed monsters known as Shokan with Goro. That beast was defeated in Mortal Kombat, and by Mortal Kombat 2 he was replaced with a far more ferocious Shokan named Kintaro. The Kintaro fight comes just before the player makes their way to Shao Kahn, making him the penultimate battle in the game. Visually, Kintaro is little more than a reskinned version of Goro, but he's fundamentally more than that when it comes to his moves. Defeating him requires an extreme level of mastery over whichever character the player has chosen to use in the fight. There's no clear strategy to defeating him, unlike his boss, so it takes most players several attempts to score their first win against him. One of the most annoying moves is his stomping ability, which consumes a third of your health. This is always followed by a taunt animation. Whenever this happens, the player has the advantage for a moment, and it is possible to score a hit. If the player misses out, they've opened themselves up to another attack. On the upside, once you've defeated him, the player faces off against Shao Kahn, who is relatively easy in comparison. Number 9. The Pursuer, Dark Souls 2. The Dark Souls franchise features dozens of bosses, mini-bosses, and expansion bosses, so there are plenty of difficult enemies to choose from. Across the series, the most annoying boss, who is arguably the toughest to defeat, has to be the Pursuer from Dark Souls 2. The character is aptly named, as his primary function is to pursue the player. He's a large knight decked out in heavy black armor and uses an ultra greatsword to implement his heavy hitter set of moves. Despite his size, he flies around the screen and can close in on the player from far away. The Pursuer is often selected as the most frustrating mini-boss in the game, thanks to its relentless pursuit of the character and his ability to respawn. He's also got unblockable moves, including an impaling attack, followed by homing magic capable of inflicting curse. He's tough, but if you do find yourself right on that edge of rage quitting, there are multiple strategy guides available as to how to defeat him. While most players can make their way through him after learning his moves, the fact that he relentlessly pursues the player throughout the Forest of Fallen Giants makes him the most frustrating mini-boss in the game. Number 8. Tokka and Raza, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. In the arcade version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, Tokka and Raza appear as the bosses of the pirate ship level, but over on the Super Nintendo, they were demoted to mini-boss status. Here they can be found as the penultimate double mini-bosses of the Technodrome level. Despite their diminished status from being a double boss to being a double mini-boss, they are far more challenging in their new SNES role. Tokka and Raza are able to team up their attacks against the player, which compounds their hits to cause more damage with each move. One of the most frustrating involves Tokka withdrawing into his shell to serve as a skateboard for Raza to ride around the screen, hitting the turtles from every possible angle. If that wasn't tough enough, they've also got an Ice Breath and Fire Breath attack respectively. For a button masher, they're a surprisingly tough duo to take down. Despite their combined difficulty, the two characters are incredibly stupid. They occasionally hit one another instead of the player, and when this happens, they take damage. The player can't sit by waiting for them to defeat one another, but it does help knock off some health when this happens. Number 7. The Berserker, Gears of War. Gears of War features a plethora of locust enemies, but most of them are male. That's because the female versions come in a very different and far more threatening form, as mini-bosses called Berserkers. In the game, Berserkers are humongous and blind, but also incredibly ferocious and tough to beat. When the player comes face to face with a Berserker, they're pretty much screwed. The difficulty stems from their blindness, which is countered by their excellent hearing. Whenever they hear something, like a player moving about, they charge like a freight train into the sound, flattening whatever they stumble across. While it may seem wise to spray and pray with whatever weapon is in hand, that won't do anything but call it towards you. Normal weapons will not penetrate its thick hide. In fact, the only way to kill this thing is to lure it outside and attack it with the space-based weapons platform, the Hammer of Dawn. This requires the player to stealthily move around the Berserker while luring it towards breakable doorways. If a player manages to do this, the Berserker will eventually be drawn outside where it can be dispatched. Still, it's not easy, and avoiding this giant beast is no simple task. Number 6. Dr. Salvador, Resident Evil 4. Whenever the player is wandering about the lovely landscape of Resident Evil 4, they might just stumble upon a physician wielding an insta-kill chainsaw with a bag on his head. That's Chainsaw Man, better known as Dr. Salvador, and he's easily the most annoying and difficult mini-boss in the game. Dr. Salvador loves to turn up whenever the player happens to be stuck in an area, but his favorite time to appear comes whenever the player is surrounded already by a bunch of enemies. While you're already in the midst of trying to deal with a bunch of foes, the faint sound of a chainsaw in the distance will definitely make your hair stand on end. That sound quickly becomes the most terrifying one in the game, which is saying something about a game filled with undead monsters. Dr. Salvador wields his chainsaw like a surgeon's scalpel, and he's insanely good at carving the player into a pile of body parts. One of the most frustrating aspects of Dr. Salvador is his relentless pursuit of the player across multiple areas of the game. He pops up in Chapter 1.1, 1.3, 4.2, and 4.3, with multiple appearances in several chapters. Number 5. The Tank, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 feature a special infected character aptly named the Tank. These giant monsters are arguably the most powerful infected in the franchise. Their ability to tear through an entire squad with minimal effort makes them the deadliest mini-bosses players have to face. The Tank is built like, well, you only need to look at him to know where it gets its name. It can appear at any time and any place throughout the games, making the Tank an unwelcome surprise whenever it shows its ugly head. It's next to impossible to take on the Tank single-handedly. Doing so is all but guaranteed suicide, so players need to team up to take this one on. Even when this happens, it's still a good chance the Tank will run through every player in the squad, as it can take one hell of a beating. Defeating the Tank takes teamwork, precision, and above all else, a crap ton of ammo. You can hit it with Molotov cocktails as much as possible while spraying it with bullets from afar. While doing this, be sure to keep moving, or it will take advantage of a stationary player and wipe them off the map. Number 4. Big Daddy Bioshock. Bioshock is filled with iconic imagery, but perhaps none more so memorable than the big daddies that are spread throughout the first and second games. Look at this guy. There are several different types of big daddies found in Bioshock and Bioshock 2. Still, whatever version a player faces, they'll be in for an intense fight. Big daddies are insanely tough, which is largely due to their being genetically enhanced people who've had their skin grafted onto an enormous diving suit. This provides a great deal of protection, making them incredibly tough enemies requiring pretty much every type of weapon to take them down. Most players will find big daddies to be the most challenging enemies in the game, and taking them out requires players to go to great lengths while fighting them. The difficulty of fighting a big daddy will vary wildly depending on the environment, the type of big daddy, and your ability to use traps to your advantage while fighting them. The most interesting aspect of a big daddy fight is that they're entirely optional. Players can take them on, if you dare, or they can avoid them entirely. It's up to the player whether or not they choose to engage. Still, once they're attacked, they explode in a fit of murderous rage, so be prepared before annoying a big daddy. Number 3. Star Wolf Squadron, Star Fox 64. As the player makes their way to the final fight against Andros, they will find a formidable foe standing in their way. Over the planet Venom, the player will face off against the Starwolf team in an all-range mode dogfight that tests the player's abilities and patience. The Battle of Venom pits the player against 4 members of the Starwolf Squadron, and they're all flying the Wolfen II starfighters. These are the most advanced fighters in the game, with extreme maneuverability, making them super hard to track and hit during a dogfight. The player will find that their ability to use lock-on shots and bomb launchers no longer work, which puts them at a distinct disadvantage. The multi-mini boss fight is intense and difficult, but more than that, it's pure dogfighting and emphasizes the best aspect of the Star Fox franchise. Instead of shooting a giant floating head in the sky, the player must fly like crazy over the planet Venom while engaging in a dogfight against dynamic enemies. Number 2. Insidious, Bayonetta II. Insidious, also known as the Consumer of All, is an insanely challenging sub-boss that can be found during the beginning of Chapter 7. The character is a gigantic manta ray-like demon that looks like it should be the endgame boss, but in Bayonetta 2, it's found about halfway through the game. Still, Insidious is incredibly hard to defeat, and while it is humongous, its primary attacks come from its large eyes found on the underside of its wings. It fires off deadly beam energy from the eyes, but that's hardly its only attack move. It also uses its immense size to its advantage. The player must take on the eye to kill the beast, and it requires a great deal of hits and deadly attacks. When the player finally rips an eye out via Madama Butterfly, it engages in a fight with Loki, which results in its second eye dropping. When this happens, Insidious is defeated. That is, right up until another Insidious arrives and swallows Bayonetta alive, and it's revealed that the continuation of the level exists in the monster's insides. Lovely. Number 1. Dark Link, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time features the appearance of Dark Link as a mini-boss found in the Water Temple. Dark Link is a reflection of Link, but not just because he's the evil version of the character. More than that, he's a mirror image of Link, making him one of the game's most formidable enemies. Every move that Link makes against Dark Link is reflected, which ultimately results in his ability to defend himself from just about everything thrown his way. Additionally, Dark Link has the same amount of health or heart containers as Link. To defeat him, the player must hit Dark Link with the Master Sword once for each heart container they have, but hitting him is no easy task. When a blow is finally landed, Dark Link falls through the floor and then springs back up to face Link again. Dark Link begins the fight nearly transparent, but as the battle progresses, he will become opaque. His aggressiveness also rises exponentially as this happens, while simultaneously becoming weaker. Dark Link is well known for being one of the hardest mini-bosses in all of gaming, which is why he scored the number 1 place on this list. Let me know down in that comment box which mini-bosses haunt your nightmares. I've been Jess for WhatCulture, thanks so much for sticking with me, and be sure to stay tuned to us here for plenty more content.